wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seahawk fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with Keith Myers for our midweek Volume 4 show. How you doing, man? Nice to see you again.
Yeah, it's I'm doing good. We're ready for the midweek show. This week we're going to take a look at the defense and figure out what the heck is going on and why are they so bad. But overall, you know what? They still won last week, so I'm still feeling pretty good from that. And got a chance to win this week. We'll see.
Yeah, I guess, before we talk about the defense, and we're going to do that for most of the show, I mean, it'd be kind of hard not to talk about the offense just a little bit. And Geno Smith, second ranked overall offense on Football Outsiders DVOA, which I couldn't have possibly predicted at this stage of the season. I mean, we're nearly a quarter of the way through the season. We've got the 17th game. Otherwise, a quarter of the way through the season, second ranked overall offense on Football Outsiders. Now, granted, Keith, we've played the Atlanta Falcons and the Lions as part of that. And then we still don't know exactly where Denver's going to be on their defense. It looks like the 49ers defense is outstanding, top 5 defense overall in the NFL. Other than that, the Seahawks really haven't been challenged too much. The schedule looks like it's going to get a little bit more difficult. We've got the Saints, Cardinals, Chargers, Giants, Cardinals, Bucks in a row there coming up in the next 6 weeks. And so it doesn't get any easier for them. But I really do love what I'm seeing on the offensive side of the ball with the running game coming. Penny's up for the ground player of the week. Geno Smith for passing. You take a look at players like Will Disley. He's been targeted 12 times. He's had 12 catches on those 12 targets, including 3 touchdowns. Leads the NFL for tight ends in that category. Third among all wide receivers with 3 touchdowns. So lots of standout players, I think, on the offensive side of the ball. But we are here for the defense. It's kind of pathetic. So I thought I'd start by just kind of going through a few different things. After 5 straight seasons between 2012 and 2016, where the defense was literally ranked, top 5 for yards allowed and points and so forth, the Seahawks have been ranked 11th, 16th, 26th, 22nd, and 28th in the previous 5 years heading into 2022. And we're currently ranked 31st in overall defense after 4 games, Keith. And it's, I could just go on. I mean, you could go almost on every category, and we're ranked 30th or lower in almost every category. And so you'd mentioned the idea of trying to figure this thing out, trying to come up with some answers in this show as to what are the fixes. And honestly, I don't know that we can have a complete answer because no matter what we do or what we say on the show, I think the caveat still needs to be, this is not just a 1-year fix. It just isn't. This is going to require another, at least one more cycle of free agency and the NFL draft to even come close to getting the players, I think, necessary to successfully implement this scheme.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to. Is you've got a team that's switching from a 4-3 to a 3-4 that still has a lot of 4-3 personnel, and now as they're switching to this 3-4. You're making guys they're 4-3 personnel playing in a 3-4, and it's not working. And I think that Daryl Taylor is probably the best example of that. This is a guy that has all the athleticism and all the talent in the world, and he currently, despite starting and he only has his minutes or snaps go down in this last game. He has 7 tackles. That's it.
And he was expected to be one of the largest impact players in this entire defense, along with Jordan Brooks.
Well, Jordan Brooks has 43 tackles, and he's, top 5 in the NFL. And yes, they're not coming near the line of scrimmage, but there's a lot of reasons for that. Some of it is his ability to get off blocks and shed those blocks and get upfield. But a lot of it's also what's going on in front of him.
But you still can't really kind of give him a pass. I mean, I'm not giving him
a pass.
I'm not talking about you, Keith. I'm just saying in general, it's hard because you are right. There are certain things that are happening in front of him that are out of his control, and he's kind of doing what he needs to do. However, he's still in a situation where he's out of position and he's struggling with tackling, and he's just not making the plays. He's expected to be kind of on a Pro Bowl level. He's not that at this point in the season, and a lot of that has to do with the personnel around him. You're right about that.
Yeah, I mean, and there's personnel problems, but like Uchenna Nwosu has played pretty well. He's got 2 sacks at this point. He's on pace for.
Can you imagine this defense without him?
Oh God, this defense is already bad, and you lose him. Shelby Harris is a guy who the defense is better when he's in there, and they played 2 games without him, and you could tell. But they played this last game with him, and they still gave up a lot of yards. So he's clearly not. Oh, you have to have him in order to make this work, because it didn't work even when they had him. I think he was a big difference. He was a big help, actually. I think it would have been worse had he not even been in there. But he got a 79 overall grade from Pro Football Focus. He is a very good player, doing his best. He's one of the few players in this defense that is he is a 3-4 player. He's a guy that is he's played in the 3-4. He fits the 3-4 scheme. He is what the Seahawks need in their defensive end, and he's one of the few people that really fit that description. A lot of the guys that are out here are, like I said, they're guys that belong in a 4-3.
Well, let's take a look at this a little bit, because there's not a huge amount of carryover from last year, and they kind of did have an opportunity to kind of churn about 33% of this defense this last offseason and get the players that they hand chose to come in and be part of this new defense, Keith. So we're talking Al Woods came back, but they paid him. They signed him to a new 2-year deal. They paid Brian Monet. They got Shelby Harris. Quentin Jefferson came on. Daryl Johnson, who's now hurt, they found off a practice squad. Uchenna Nwosu. They elected to go with Cody Barton as a starter, even though they had options during free agency and the draft to upgrade that position. They chose kind of not to. They drafted Boye Mafe. I could go on. What I'm saying is there's a lot of players now that weren't taking key rotation snaps last year that are now taking them, but we still have seemingly similar issues, Keith, as far as communication breakdowns, as far as players getting out of position and so forth.
You listed in there guys they chose to bring back because they could, and they needed to fill out the roster, guys like Brian Monet. He is not a guy that fits this defense. He's a guy that fits a 4-3. He's just a big, giant body in the middle that eats blocks. That isn't what they need from him. And he doesn't do what they need from him in this defense. He's just another body.
Well, they do need a true nose tackle, Keith.
Yeah, but he's not a nose tackle. He's not a starter, right? He's a guy that rotates in and plays here and there. Poona Ford is the guy that they're asking him and Al Woods to be that nose tackle.
And I think we're seeing the shortcomings of Poona Ford in this defense, in that he's just not stout enough. I think he's getting run over.
he was when they were in the 4-3. He's a guy that, yeah, I expected them to move him outside. Like having him continue to play the nose in this defense, I think is a mistake.
Problematic. I agree.
But he is a guy that needs to be playing on either the 3 tech or the 5 tech defensive end positions.
And this is not a bad player.
No,
you know, he's a good player. He's a solid player. He's had solid contributions. They paid him for a reason. But this year, I think he's really struggling. They're getting run over in the middle. They're just not.
He's struggling with the new scheme, and they need to figure out what they're doing. Part of it is that when I look at they're playing the 3-4, and on a lot of plays, they're asking their the defensive lineman to 2 gap. And for those of you that don't know what I mean by that, what that means is instead of diving into a gap and, you know, being there to make the tackle, you stack the guy in front of you, the guard or the center. You stack them, getting both hands on them, square them up, and then you read the play. And then if it's running, if it's going into the hole to your left, you shed the blocker to the left and try and make the tackle in the hole at that point. But if it's to the right, you also go there. So you're in charge of both gaps that way. And Poona Ford is a guy that's better at getting upfield into a hole than stacking a guard and trying to 2 gap. And I think that's what we're running into. So this is a good player who's being asked to do things that aren't great for him. That
only tells really the half the story, though, because where we're really getting torched is on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, I thought it would actually improve this year, although I was worried about the edge setting component of this. We'd mentioned it early on in the off season. And then when we didn't really address that too much in the draft, I was concerned a little bit that we'd fall off a little bit on being able to stop the run. It's one of the pillars of Pete Carroll defense is the ability to stop the run. And without that, this whole thing doesn't work because everything is kind of dependent upon that. You kind of hopefully make teams one-dimensional. And we talked about that a little bit on this Lions game with Jared Goff. I thought, well, we're up enough at halftime now where we've made the Lions one-dimensional, and they still came out and ran the ball, I think, quite wisely, actually. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the outside vulnerability that we're seeing. Quentin Jefferson out there, Shelby Harris, obviously, but he missed the game. But Jordan Brooks and Cody Barton and Daryl Taylor are having struggles being in position. And when they are in position, they're missing tackles. We've got one of the highest missed tackle rates in the NFL as well, which means people are out of position.
That's a completely different issue. The missed tackle part, we can talk about that. But you're talking about on the outside. So you're looking at Quentin Jefferson and Shelby Harris. Those aren't outside guys. Those are guys that are, trying to stack the line and force, and make it hard on the running back. When they're getting beat on the outside, it's because guys like Daryl Taylor aren't in position. They're not doing what they need to do. They're not setting the edge and taking this outside run and forcing it back into the middle, forcing it back into, Jordan Brooks and Cody Barton. That's what's been missing on those outside runs, more than anything. And that's been a problem. And it's been his side a lot. It's been Nuosu's side occasionally. Nuosu's been great against the pass, but against the run, he's, he gets upfield too far and it makes it too easy. And I think it's just the case for him, like he needs to make sure that, if he's getting upfield, rushing the passer, that it's actually a pass play. And I think he'll do that. Cody Barton has been problematic. He played pretty well the first game against Denver, but he's been getting progressively worse in that he's getting out of position. He's not filling the right gap. He's, or even when he is filling the gap, like the Jared Goff rushing touchdown, this last week, he was in the right gap, but he chose to go in and hit the offensive guard rather than tackle the quarterback who's running right by him. Like, I don't think he thought that Goff had the ball, so he was trying to, like, make an impact in the interior. But Goff did have the ball, and you're in that gap. Step up and make that hit. It's freaking Jared Goff. Like, he's not going to run you over.
And then we saw the Hawkinson play on the sideline where he tried to just kind of shove him out of the bounds, up high. He didn't hit him at all down low, and that's what you need to do in that position. I think he was just kind of, somehow his body was just kind of contorted just slightly, and he didn't have any leverage. So when he hit Hawkinson, he just kind of bounced off, and Hawkinson was kind of shocked that he was still upright and just kept going. And so was Cody Barton, trailing then, frustrated that he wasn't able to make that play, and knew that Hawkinson had a clear field in front of him and he was going to make a big play, and he did. 83 yards, I think, on that completion and run.
And then, so you've got there's lots to unwrap here. Lots of blame to go around across the thing. The Seahawks paid pretty big money for Quandre Diggs, and they're not getting out of it what they paid for.
Now, let me ask you this. We know Quandre's a good player, Keith. He did come off a serious injury last year, though. That could be a factor. We just don't know for sure. What we do know, though, is that he's got some young players in front of him, and he's got such a hot mess all over the place. He might be just trying to do too much, and playing outside of his normal responsibilities, which also adds to the situation. Let me show you how pervasive this entire problem is just through some statistics here. The Seahawks are 31st in points and yards allowed. The only team that's worse is the Lions, and we saw that firsthand what that looks like. 32nd in net yards per pass attempt allowed. 31st in drives that end in points allowed. 29th in rushing yards allowed. 28th in yards per carry allowed, and 32nd in plays and yards per drive allowed. Seahawks are ranked 31st overall in DVOA. So it's not just the rush, it's also the pass. I mean, the whole thing is just kind of a mess.
Yeah. As a defense, they're just bad. And some of it is correctable. Some of it, getting Boye Mafe in there for Daryl Taylor. We saw that in this last game. It wasn't, it was only for some of the snaps. It was getting him more snaps, but he's not getting a starter's level snaps.
34 snaps.
Yeah. Out of a lot. There was over 70 snaps for Detroit. But so he was better, but clearly not. I mean, he wasn't great.
He's still young. He's still a young player.
We knew that coming in, right? That was a project.
Also, Maffei's coming in playing on a really bad defense. Yeah. So, he's just he's one of those players that can't do everything. He's got to focus on playing, within himself and so forth.
Absolutely.
You get thrown into a defense that's a hot mess. You're almost wanting to try to do more because you feel like you need to, and it just contributes to the problem. So somehow, some way, and we saw this the last couple of years, Pete Carroll kind of taking the reins back from Ken Norton to break down the defense into just real basic, hitting, tackling, read, and run defense. And we may have to do the same thing here. I don't think it's the same. It seems like it's the same, but we're talking about completely different personnel for the most part. A few other, holdout players, but mostly new personnel. We're talking about new coaches and good coaches. Clint Hurtt's a good coach. Sean Desai's a good coach. They've got secondary coaches that are really, really good, and Carl Scott. Something's not translating between the coaching and the play on the field.
Well, that's part of it, and part of it is a talent issue. I mean, you look across the board. We were looking at, and you and I both were fooled. Like, we both thought this defense was going to be pretty good, and it clearly isn't. But you look at who would you rather have, and just on a talent standpoint, not on a scheme fit standpoint, but on a talent standpoint, who's more talented, Carlos Dunlap or Quentin Jefferson? Right, Dunlap. Clearly, he is a better, more accomplished player throughout his entire career.
It depends on what you're asking him to do, though. Like if you're asking Carlos Dunlap to defend the run, the answer is no.
But
Quentin Jefferson isn't really that.
The run. He's been
but
terrible,
he's better
and he's
historically.
not the pass rusher.
Historically, Quentin Jefferson's been a little better defending the run, and he's been asked to run from the 3-tech position, which is a little different. And he's actually been really effective at that.
Well, you're
up until this year.
You're looking at we're comparing right one scheme versus another, and what you're asking on a pure talent standpoint, which would you rather have?
Carlos Dunlap.
Dunlap is clearly the more talented player, and you're not going to convince me otherwise.
At 30, well, he's 33 now.
Yeah, and how old is Quentin Jefferson?
I think he's
on his
Quentin Jefferson's like 29 or 30.
He's not a young player either. Who would you rather have right now, even with even with a diminished skill set, Bobby Wagner or Cody Barton?
Well, sheikies, Keith. I thought you were going to give me a somewhat fair comparison and say at least Jordan Brooks. Yeah, obviously, right? But yeah, that's if I have one gripe about the coaching staff, because it's really hard to pin this thing on the coaching staff yet without really seeing the whole picture. But if there's one thing I could pin on John Schneider and Pete Carroll is not upgrading that spot. I mean, it's a glaring hole. It's a glaring spot. I know Cody did well in limited snaps last year, filling in for Bobby Wagner in 2 or 3 games against bad offenses. And so I think that was a huge mistake actually. And, one of the things I think could really help this team, if they could do it, and they just don't have the personnel to do it, is get Jordan Brooks out of the spot he's currently in, and see if he can play on the weak side or something, because he's got the team speed, he's got the ability to be in coverage, but I'm not sure if he's reading defenses correctly and providing the. I
don't think Jordan.
He's the guy he was the guy with the green dot on his helmet, and he's calling out defenses and putting people in position, and that's some of the problem. And he's a first-year guy doing that, so I'm not going to say it's perfect. I think that inherently might be an issue. And if a guy like Roquan Smith, for example, who requested a trade earlier, if something like that comes down at the trade deadline, I would jump on that if I was the Seahawks, because that gives you a huge opportunity to get Barton out of there and move Jordan Brooks around so he's not so responsible for the entire thing, and get another guy of Pro Bowl level quality in the middle there to help gun that thing up.
I mean, I don't agree. I'm not disagreeing with most of that, but Jordan Brooks isn't the problem. He needs to get off blocks a little better, but he's not misreading stuff. He's not, not breaking down stuff. He's not getting people in position like doing that part of the job poorly. It's the guys around him not winning at their responsibility, whether they either choose not to do their responsibility and they're freelancing, or they just get beat by the player in front of them. That's the problem. Like I said, he needs to get off blocks a little better. He also needs to be blocked less often.
I totally agree with you.
In front of him to do that.
I think that there's 5 or 6 players that we could be talking about that are around Jordan Brooks that are problematic. Let's talk about Josh Jones. Let's talk about Sidney Jones a little bit. Let's talk about Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant's a rookie. He's a good player. He's a nice player, but he's a rookie, and he's asked to play a position that he's never played before until this year. And the first 4 games, he's just kind of struggled with that. I think he's going to get better. He needs to be out there playing, but right now he's had some costly mistakes, some holding penalties, kept drives alive, and so forth. He's a player that's in and around there as a slot corner. He's going to be in the middle of the field. A guy like Daryl Taylor, obviously. Daryl Taylor, I think, is the most disappointing player on this entire defense, given the expectation level that we had going into the season, that he was going to elevate his game and be an impact player, possibly get to 10 sacks in a year. We were talking about that being almost a given. The fact that he had 7 last year, he's going to be in this scheme. It's ready made for him. It turns out not so much.
No, he's the guy that needs to be in a 4-3. And that's what you're saying. It's because you put him as an outside linebacker in this 3-4, and now you're asking him to do too much. Now you're asking him to move backwards, to cover occasionally, to make more reads, as far as all this stuff, to just do different things than what he's athletic enough to. But it's not stuff that he's ever had to do, and it just isn't working. He needs to be that 7 tech defensive
moving forward all the time
in a 4-3. Yep, moving forward. So when he sets the edge, it's not moving outside, engaging a block on the outside in order to do it. He's already there because he's got his hand on the ground. He's got the guy right in front of him. You just move forward. That's who it's turning out that Daryl Taylor is. And if the Seahawks were still playing a 4-3 and they could put him in that spot, what traditionally Seattle would call the Leo side, he'd be really good right now because he was really good in that role last year. But they're not asking him to do that. They want him to be an outside linebacker because the Leo position doesn't exist anymore. He's one of those guys that needs to be on another team. He needs to be in another system. The Seahawks should trade him even this year. Like not even waiting. Just if they can get an asset for him between now and the trade deadline, they should trade him because he's never going to be an asset that works in this defense because he doesn't fit the scheme like at all. And honestly, Quentin Jefferson doesn't fit the scheme. Like we talked about that being a good signing because it's kind of underrated and all of that. But then you look at what they're asking him to do. And you're asking Quentin Jefferson to 2-gap? No.
And defend the run. And he's not that.
He's not a run defender. He's a guy that gives you interior push against the pass. And you're asking him to try and keep Jordan Brooks clean, as far as that, and he can't do it. Like he's just not that guy. But the thing is, this is a team that needed bodies. They needed guys that could actually go in and play snaps. Some of the guys they got, like him, weren't good scheme fits, but there wasn't an equivalent good scheme fit out there that wanted to sign with them. And it became one of those things where you filled in the roster as you could.
It's hard to pinpoint a loss as being a factor, but the loss of Jamal Adams. Now, we talked the previous couple of years, he's left the season early. This year, only a little bit of a game, and he was gone for the season. But it seemed like the defense was going to be at least hybridly, if that's a word, schemed around his skill set. And that when he disappeared suddenly, they didn't really have an answer to fill that void. Josh Jones played a lot of preseason snaps, looked good at times doing that, and then came in and has been a regular season disappointment in that spot.
Yeah, because he isn't Jamal Adams. When Josh Jones was playing, he was playing a more traditional strong safety. He was rotating into free safety alignments and that kind of stuff. He wasn't doing Jamal Adams things. Now, is the defense asking him to be Jamal Adams? Because if they are, you're asking him to be someone he's not. And is the rest of the defense up front expecting him to come in and fill assignments in the same way Jamal Adams would? Well, that's not his skill set. And is that perhaps might be the problem, that you just have to alter the scheme now that Adams isn't there. If he was one of the things that you designed around, you have to alter the scheme because you don't have him anymore.
So there's two players that I've noted in this last game, and we talked about briefly before the game, in that Boye Mafe would get more snaps, and Daryl Johnson. Daryl Johnson went out with an injury. Looks like he's going to be a long-term injured situation into November or 1st of December. So I'm not sure what his status is going to be. But the other player I wanted to kind of put in with Ryan, with Boye Mafe is Ryan Neal. Now, Ryan Neal, we've known for a while around the team as being a physical player, kind of a diverse player that can play high and low and in good run fits. And Ryan Neal got some good snaps this last game. So there is some upside and some hope there that he can take the Josh Jones snaps and be a better player.
Well, we saw Ryan Neal step in for Jamal Adams in Adams's first year and play surprisingly well, because at the time he was a guy that we didn't really know. He had tried to make the team at safety. He tried to make the team at corner. He kept ending up on the practice squad, and then things just kind of fell, and he was the next man up after a bunch of injuries and ended up starting at strong safety and then played well. And we were like, his diversity and his knowledge of so many different positions in that defense was really valuable. And then last year, he got a chance to play and did some stuff, and he's been good. And we've seen him in a couple of games this year. Come in. He made a very good impact play right in the beginning of this this last game, and where he came up and made a stop and forced a punt, on third down. So we've seen good things from him in the past. Is he Jamal Adams level talent? No, but who else is? Like, that's asking him to be someone he's not again. But he is a good player who is more scheme diverse than Josh Jones and can do a lot more things. And especially when they go, like, if they're going to go into the nickel and have that third safety, you've got to have him in there, right? He's got to be that guy. And sometimes when you go two safeties, you should leave him in there and pull Jones, because you're not getting anything out of Jones right now.
I agree. A couple of the other players that I think are struggling is like Mike Jackson and Xavier Crawford. I don't want to see Xavier Crawford in there anymore. I just don't. I think that he's overmatched, and Trey Brown can't get back fast enough. I would like Trey Brown back on the roster as soon as possible.
Oh, he needs to. Yeah, he needs to get healthy, and we don't want to rush him back and all that. But the idea that he won't be an instant upgrade over Xavier Crawford would be laughable. I mean, he's just so much better player.
And I'd like to see Artie Burns come back and play a little bit too, because I think there's some physicality there and some press man coverage stuff that Tariq and Artie Burns could do to kind of make life difficult for some of the bigger receivers that we're going to see coming up. Here's what
I think they should. I think honestly, Mike Jackson, it was a nice story in camp. He, played pretty well in the first game, but he is starting to struggle. And Sidney Jones is there. We saw him all last year be the best, cornerback on the roster. It's time. Like, I get he was hurt and missed most of camp and all of that, and you got to get him up to speed. But he's been back now for 3 weeks. It's time to make that transition.
So here's our defensive back, bottom 5 in the Pro Football Focus grades. I know, but it gives us a little bit of a barometer of what's going on. Xavier Crawford, 40.4 overall, 27.3 coverage grade. Sidney Jones, 41.7 overall, 35.6 coverage grade. Michael Jackson, 50.8 overall, 26.5 tackling grade. Some of those might be problematic. I'm not saying Pro Football Focus is great at grading secondary stuff, but at least it gives us a window in some of that.
It's never on the TV angle, so they just a lot of times guess.
So here's what Pete Carroll had to say regarding any personnel changes that might be pending. This is a long quote. We're still competing. We've got some competition, and that's why we're rolling guys around to see who's starting. All of our guys are going to keep playing. This is a lot of coach speak. The guys that have been in there, I think Mafe played 34 plays or something like that. That's getting going. We need more, and we'll keep rolling the guys and making sure that we are trying to keep our guys fresh. I think we just need time to keep working and keep finding our way and making sure we are getting all of the right info so we can make the right choices. But now, most everybody that you have seen rotate are going to continue to do so, which means he's out of options and he's just going to keep playing the players that he has and for something different.
Well, the biggest problem I think is up front, because you've got guys like Shelby Harris and Al Woods that are playing well, but the two of them are playing 2 out of the 3 positions and only about 40% of the snaps each, because there's a heavy rotation on the defensive line. There has to be. The rest of the defensive line is not playing well. There's not a single player that's playing well, and that's hurting the linebackers. It's hurting the pass rush, which is hurting the secondary. You've already got a secondary that, you got guys like Mike Jackson and Josh Jones in there that weren't expected to play. This is a talent deficient situation. And if you are hurting your secondary by not getting pressure on the quarterback or not being able to stop the run and asking your, corners and safeties to come up and make a tackle so that a 15-yard doesn't become a 50-yard play, that's where you end up in trouble. And if you can fix the stuff up front, it would make a lot of stuff better. But there's no one on the roster or the practice squad that's going to fix this problem. So Miles Adams was the big story in camp, and he's been massive disappointment when he's gotten on the field during regular games.
It's difficult to look at this roster on the defensive side of the ball and see players that you would look to retain in 2023. It just is. There's just not a lot. Tariq Woolen obviously is the standout and the guy that deserves all the press that's going to come his way in the years to come, because he's just going to be a mammoth player for the Seahawks, I think, which is amazing. But beyond that, shelves are empty.
Jordan Brooks, and Shelby Harris.
And
Boye Mafe. I think you got those 4 guys. That you can
Kobe Bryant maybe in the slot. I mean, you just don't know yet. He just hasn't had enough time. But other than that, that's it. So there's 4 players out of 25.
Yeah, that I think you can build your team around. Quandre Diggs hasn't been playing as well. Part of that I think is that he's not getting a lot of help and he's trying to do too much. I think maybe if we get him to just focus on his responsibilities and not everyone else's, he'll get back to being a better player. But
I'm not going to pin you down as far as names in college football because we just haven't watched enough college football yet. But what are the type of players that you think the Seahawks would draft early next year or have their eye on as far as early fits? Say we've got 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and a third. So we've got 5 picks in the top 75 or 80. Where do you think they should be allocated?
Well, I mean, obviously the first one's got to go to quarterback. If you're in position, if you're not, and you're down at 8 or 9, and none of the good quarterbacks is going to drop to you, that's a different story. But assuming that you're 4th overall, at that point, yeah, you got to take a quarterback. But after that, all those other picks, in my opinion, need to go to the defense. And the first thing I would look for is a Shelby Harris caliber defensive 3-4 defensive end, which would be a 4-3 offensive tackle. Right. So that's that big playmaker in the middle that's just going to make everyone around him better, especially the inside linebackers. After that, I would go and get another outside linebacker, a pass rusher, another Boye Mafe, but one that can come in and play full time right away. Right. So it's the front. Then you go into the second level. Then I would go and get either a safety or a cornerback, and then I'd come back to the linebackers and find an interior linebacker. Mainly because interior linebackers tend to come off the board later. They're not like guys that go in the first round. And so I think you can
athletic and fast ones though come off quick, but yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, you look at Jordan Brooks. He was a guy that was picked at the end of the first round. So maybe you have to do something like that, or early in round 2. But that's where you're looking is, you've got to go.
How about that super disruptive, nasty nose tackle guy that just eats blocks and eats quarterbacks? I mean, we saw that kid from Georgia. that was on the board, when Seattle was at 9. We thought maybe he might be in contention if Seattle dropped back a little bit. In fact, he did come off the board for another team, but can't remember the guy's name right now.
Jordan Davis.
Jordan Davis. So a kid like Jordan Davis, I think, would be an outstanding fit in this defense.
Yeah.
I just think we need somebody like that to kind of just anchor the entire thing.
Yeah, and so that would be, I mean, to me, that's what I was talking about on the line, right? So you got to have that big guy, playmaker guy in that 3-4, whether it be at the 3 tech or the nose. That's just going to be a guy that's disruptive. They have to double team on every play. That keeps our interior linebackers clean so they can come up and make tackles. That is the most important thing that this defense currently does not have.
Yeah.
And
in fact, I wouldn't mind paying for that. So getting somebody like that in free agency, a proven commodity, a guy that doesn't have to learn for 2 or 3 years, a guy that can come in and lead right away. Because the team is devoid of leadership as well. You take a look at Quandre Diggs, he's about it on the defensive side. Shelby Harris is outspoken. He's getting there. But he still needs to kind of come around a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, they really wanted Jamal Adams to be that guy. And I think he could have been, but he lasted a half a game and now he's out. He's out for the year. So what are you going to do?
So what we're saying is, out of all this talk, is we're kind of saying, well, the hope's in the future, because the answers are not currently on the roster. And we just kind of have to get through this painful year on defense. Now, we could see a somewhat of an improvement. Things have improved. Pete Carroll's a good coach. He's going to rally the troops and get them as good as they can. Personnel-wise, is going to hold them back a little bit.
I think what they need to do is they need to make sure that guys are doing their job. They're not freelancing. They're not trying to do someone else's job. They're not like, I have to get outside and make this tackle because I don't trust this other person's going to. I'm going to stay in my lane and trust that person will do it. If they can get to that will make the lane. That'll make things better.
But that is the exact same thing that was said now 3 years running.
Yeah, but I think it's different. I think it's a different situation. In this case, it's these guys. The defense is bad, and they just want to make a play. They're just trying to. If I can get up and help out and make that tackle, we can get off the field and make a play, get a stop, all that kind of stuff. Last year, the first 6 games, it looked like guys either didn't know what they were supposed to be doing or didn't care.
Or defied the coaches on purpose.
Yeah. Trey Flowers comes to mind.
Trey Flowers.
That's what I meant by didn't care. He just straight up, he knew what his responsibilities were going to be, and he's like, yeah, I'm not doing that. That's not what I do well. I'm going to do this other thing because that's what I think is going to be better for the team. And it didn't work. And he got cut. And granted, he moved on, found another job, has been playing well, all of that. But Seattle's defense got better when they found a guy they put in a guy that actually would listen to the coaches and do what was being asked of them and not be like, yeah, no, I know better. That has been the problem the last 2 years, and part of the reason why I just really had no hope in Ken Norton, because the players genuinely didn't seem to want to listen to him. This one, I think, in this year, it doesn't feel that way. What I'm seeing is it's guys that they're trying to help each other out. They're trying to they're just trying to make a play, and they're doing too much. They need to actually do what's the play call asks them to do and not try and, make 3 tackles every play or all that kind of stuff.
So some of the quarterbacks that they're scheduled to face from here on out include Kyler Murray twice, Matthew Stafford twice, Justin Herbert coming up, Tom Brady, Derek Carr, Patrick Mahomes. It doesn't get any easier. It doesn't get any easier.
this defense is gonna get crushed in every single one of those games.
Well, even if the defense improves a little bit incrementally, the level of difficulty seems certain to
because they just
be overwhelming.
They just played Marcus Mariota and Jared Goff.
Yeah, and Jared Goff without DeAndre Swift, without
Amon-Ra St. Brown.
St. Brown, DJ Shark, Jonah Jackson, still racked up 45 points and over 500 yards of offense.
Yeah, and it was Jared Goff.
And our offense was smoking and keeping our defense off the field.
Yeah, this wasn't they were on the field the whole game because our offense couldn't do anything. No, our offense never punted. So the defense,
and they still had 500 yards against us.
Yeah, and
that's hard to do. Think about how hard that is to do.
And it was Jared freaking Goff. That's that right there. Just I think it sums it up. If Jared Goff can do whatever he wants against this defense, what is Patrick Mahomes going to do?
I watched Patrick Mahomes against the Arizona Cardinals in the desert here first week in person, and that was something. That was something to see. Patrick Mahomes just taking full command and marching up and down the field and doing anything he wanted to do. That's going to be a tough game for Seattle's offense, as good as they are, and I'm proud of them because nobody, not us or anybody, was figuring that they would be in any conversation of a top 10 offense in any way, let alone top 5 or whatever it is now. It's hard to keep up with Patrick Mahomes against a bottom 2 defense in the NFL.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things, like, the offense has been better, and it's been so much better than we expected. I'm also looking at, some of the competition that they've played, and I'm gonna say that they've been good in 4 of 8 quarters.
That's against marginal competition.
Well, I wouldn't call the 49ers marginal competition.
No, 49ers are top 3 defense.
Yeah. Denver's defense seems to be as advertised. Their offense is not, but their defense has been.
Yeah.
But the Falcons and Lions they're down there with Seattle.
The Falcons' defense is not great. They're overall their team is improving, but their defense has not been great.
But their defense isn't good, and the Lions' defense is the only one that you're going to put down there in the bottom 2 with Seattle. So, and they've had 4 good halves out of 8. So, yes, they've been so much better than we ever expected, and they deserve all the credit. But I don't know if it's fair to have that expectation that they're going to continue at that level.
They are facing some better defenses as well.
They're facing
those quarterbacks also come with pretty decent defenses too.
Yeah. So, basically what I'm trying to say here is I'm trying to keep people's expectations and not have them be too high, because if you end up super disappointed that the offense stumbles here in a bit, that'll hurt your viewing experience. I think it's been really fun. Gino's been way, way better than anybody expected. And it's been, especially this last game, like, that offense looked great. But them being great against the Lions doesn't make me think that they're going to be great this week against the Saints.
I think one of the better test is against the Saints here this week. We'll have a preview show here coming up in the next day or two, and we'll talk about that. Seattle's chances against the Saints. Jameis Winston has been slightly better. He's been able to hold back his penchant for throwing interceptions as much as expected, but the defense is actually a pretty good defense, so it'll be a good test. I think it's a somewhat evenly matched game. I think early before the season, you'd thought the Saints might be a little better. Turns out the Buccaneers, have been better than advertised. coming in. They lost some personnel, they lost their coach, but they're still a real good defense, and their offense isn't a slouch either. So it'll be interesting. We play them later as well in Germany, so that'll be a fun game. All right, time to get out of here, Keith. Thanks for coming in, and thanks everybody for joining us. Make sure, if you enjoy the show, to subscribe and share it with your friends. You can find us on your favorite podcast platforms, of course, our YouTube channel. You can find us on Twitter. Keith's at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.